İstanbul'dan herkese sevgilerimi, saygılarımı sunuyorum. Bugün DEİK organizasyonuyla Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nı buluşturarak hem Asya hakkında hem Asya Kalkınma Bankası hakkında görüşleri alacağız, fikirleri paylaşacağız ve karşılıklı iletişimi artıracağız. Tabii ki bugün bize katkı veren Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Hazine ve Maliye Bakanlığı Dış Ekonomik İlişkiler Genel Müdür Vekili Sayın Doktor Serhat Köksal'a katılımlar için de teşekkür ediyorum. Aynı zamanda Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın çok kıymetli temsilcileri için de teşekkürlerimi sunuyorum. Kendilerinin bilgi paylaşımlarıyla Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nı biraz daha yakından tanıma şansımız olacak. Ayrıca aşağıda da not olarak çıktı ama konuşmamı eğer İngilizce dinlemek istiyorsanız da İngilizce butonuna basabildiğiniz gibi yabancılar da Japonca'ya basarak konuşmamı Türkçe dinleyebilecekler. Değerli katılımcılar, DEİK ve 19 tane olan Asya Pasifik İş Konseylerimiz adına Asya Kalkınma Bankası İş Fırsatları seminerimizi ve bu seminere göstermiş olduğunuz ilgi, katılımlarınızdan dolayı hepinize tek tek teşekkür ediyorum. Hepinizi sevgi ve saygıyla selamlıyorum. Seminerimizin gerek Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın destek verdiği mevcut ve önümüzdeki dönem projeler, gerekse Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın tedarik ve proje finansmanı konusundaki süreçlerine yönelik iş insanlarımıza faydalı bilgiler sağlamasını ümit ediyor. Ülkemiz iş insanları ile Asya Kalkınma Bankası arasında bir nevi köprü görevi kurmayı da arzu ediyoruz. Asya Kalkınma Bankası'ndan kısaca bahsetmeden önce Türkiye'nin özellikle ihracatının yakın coğrafya, Avrupa Birliği ve daha çok Orta Doğu ülkeleriyle yaptığını hepimiz biliyoruz. Türkiye'nin dış ticaret hacmi yaklaşık 400 milyar seviyelerinde. Bunun ihracatımız kısmındaki 150-190 milyarlık ihracat kısmının da yarıdan fazlası Avrupa Birliği ülkelerine oluyor. Ancak Türkiye'nin enerji dışındaki ithalatının önemli bir kısmı Asya Pasifik ülkelerinden oluyor ve biz Asya Pasifik ülkeleriyle yaklaşık 55 milyar dolarlık bir iş hacmindeyiz ve bu iş hacminin 35 milyar dolarlık kısmı 2019'da dış ticaret açığı olarak bizim aslında Türkiye olarak iyileştirmemiz gereken bir dış ticaret verisi. Yani toplam dış ticaretimizin yaklaşık %15'ini Asya Pasifik'te yaparken dış ticaret açığımızın %50'den fazlasını yine Asya Pasifik bölgesine veriyoruz. Peki Asya Kalkınma Bankası 1966 yılında kurulmuş. Aslında başta bir bölgesel kalkınma bankası, merkezi Manila'da 31 ülkeyle başlıyor ama şimdi 67 ülkeden fazla ülkede şubesi var, yeri var ve temsilciliği var. Bu ülkelerden 48 tanesi Asya Pasifik'te ve 1991 yılında da Türkiye Asya Kalkınma Bankası'na üye oluyor. 1991 yılı deyince aslında 1992 yılı da benim için önemli. Çünkü benim Asya ve Pasifik'le ilk tanıştığım yıldır 1992. Aynı yıl DEİK'te de Türkiye-Çin İş Konseyi kuruluyor. Peki DEİK'ten bahsedince tabii ki sadece İş Konseyimizden değil, DEİK'in geneli hakkında da size bir bilgi vermek istiyorum. DEİK hakkındaki bilgileri şu şekilde toparlamaya çalışayım. Türk özel sektörünün dış dünyada açılan penceresi olan DEİK, Türkiye ile diğer ülkeler arasındaki yatırım ve ticareti arttırmak için tüm dünyaya yayılmış 146 ülke ve sektörel iş konseyleriyle 1985 yılından beri çalışmalarını ticari diplomasi anlayışıyla sürdüren bir iş platformudur. 6 kıtaya yayılmış 139 ülke bazlı iş konseyimiz, Türkiye ile bu ülkeler arasında öne çıkan sektörler ve fırsatların iş dünyası temsilcilerine tanıtılması, ortak projeler ve işbirliklerinin geliştirilmesi hedefiyle faaliyetlerini sürdürmektedir. Bugünkü toplantımızın konusuyla alakalı olarak da Türkiye Asya Pasifik İş Konseyleri olarak 6 Temmuz 2020'de Birleşmiş Milletler Gıda ve Tarım Örgütü Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Roberto Ridolfi'yi ve enerjiden yatırımlara, iklim değişikliğine, farklı alanlardaki sektörlerden uzmanları ve ağırladığımız bir konferansla gerçekleştirdik. Kısaca biz Asya Pasifik bölgesi olarak bu bölgenin farkındalığını arttırmak için elimizden gelen çabayı yapıyoruz. O yüzden de siz değerli iş insanlarını DEİK platformuna bekliyoruz. Kıymetli misafirler, son dönemde dünya olarak eşi benzerini çok nadiren yaşadığımız bir süreçten geçiyoruz. Salgın tüm dünyada sadece insan sağlığını ve günlük yaşamı etkilemekle kalmıyor, ayrıca iş yapma, iletişim kurma şekillerinden tutun, tedarik zincirleri, pazar çeşitliliği, dijitalleşmenin önemi gibi birçok konuya bakışımızı da derinden etkiliyor. Bu süreçte önce insan, sonra da bir iş dünyası temsilcisi olarak ekonomide dahil olmak üzere her alanda uluslararası dayanışmanın öneminin her zamankinden daha fazla anlaşıldığını düşünmekteyim. Ve bunu hepimiz bence hissediyoruz. O nedenle bugün gerçekleştirdiğimiz ve iş insanlarımızın 2030 yılında küresel ekonomik üretimin yarısından fazlasına katkı sağlayacak olan Asya bölgesine yönelik yatırım projeksiyonlarını ve vizyonlarına katkı sağlayacağını ümit ettiğim bu toplantıya önem atfettiğimizi de belirtmek isterim. Çünkü hakikaten Asya son dönemde yükselen bir yıldız. Dışişleri Bakanımız Sayın Mevlüt Çavuşoğlu tarafından 2019 yılı Ağustos ayında açıklanan yeniden Asya açılımı çerçevesinde ülkemizin Asya ülkeleri ile ilişkilerinin geliştirilmesi ve derinleştirilmesi hedefleniyor. Bizler bu vizyona paralel olarak iş konseylerimizin ülke bazlı etkin çalışmalarının yanı sıra özellikle Asya Pasifik İş Konseylerimizin çatısı altında ASEAN Çalışma Komitesi'nde kurduk. ASEAN'da 10 tane ülke vardır üye olan, 7 tanesinin bizde iş konseyi karşılığı var. Bunu da 10'da 10 yapmak arzusundayız. Bu komitemizin çalışmaları neticesinde ülkemiz iş insanlarının ASEAN üye ülkeleriyle daha yoğun ekonomik entegrasyonunu da hedeflemekteyiz. Diğer yandan geçtiğimiz yıl Türkiye-Çin İş Konseyimiz tarafından hazırlanan Kuşak ve Yol girişiminde Türkiye'nin konumlandırılması raporumuzun ikincisini bölgeye daha geniş bir perspektifle odaklanarak hazırlamayı da amaçlıyoruz. Yaptığımız çalışmalarla son gelişmelerin de ışığında iş insanlarımızın Asya kıtasındaki fırsatlar, projeler, gelişmeler hakkında bilgi sahibi olması ve karşılıklı işbirliklerimizin geliştirilmesi ve derinleştirilmesini de arzu ediyoruz. Ve Türk markalarına Asya Pasifik'te yapılanmalarını da şiddetle tavsiye ediyoruz. Yine DEİK olarak bu konuda da elimizden gelen desteği vermeye hazır olduğumuzu buradan da ifade etmek isterim. Değerli katılımcılar, Türkiye özel sektörüne yeni pazar olanaklarının sağlanması ve Orta Asya'daki Türkiye Cumhuriyetlerinin kalkınmasına destek olunması amacıyla Asya Kalkınma Bankası'na 1991 yılında donör ülke statüsüyle üye oldu ülkemiz, yani Türkiye'miz. Bu çerçevede Asya Pasifik bölgesinin kalkınma amacıyla projelere destek veren ve koordinasyon görevi yapan Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın sağladığı imkanlardan çok daha fazla iş insanımızın faydalanmasını arzu ettiğimizi de buradan belirtmek istiyorum. Bu panelde hep birlikte öncelikle Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nı tanıyacağız. Benim ilk başta söyleyeceklerim bunlardan oluşuyor. Ama şimdi ben sözü Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Hazine ve Maliye Bakanlığımız Dış Ekonomik İlişkiler Genel Müdür Vekili Sayın Doktor Serhat Köksal'a bırakmak istiyorum. Daha sonra da sırasıyla Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın yetkililerinin açıklamalarını, sunumlarını ve bilgilendirmelerini dinleyeceğiz. Ve sorularımız olursa da bu soruları kendilerine yönelteceğiz. Hepinize teşekkür ediyorum ve sözü Sayın Serhat Köksal'a bırakıyorum.
Murat Bey, çok teşekkür ederim. Değerli konuklar, herkese öncelikle sağlıklı günler diliyorum. Bugünkü etkinlik için Dış Ekonomik İlişkiler Kurulu'na, Asya Kalkınma Bankası temsilcilerine ve ayrıca vakit ayırıp izleyen tüm misafirlerimize teşekkür ederim. Seminerin Asya'daki iş insanlarımız ve yatırımcılarımız için aydınlatıcı bilgiler ve fırsatlar sunacağına eminim. Tüm kamu ve özel sektör kurum ve kuruluşlarımızla birlikte bütüncül bir anlayışla geliştirilen yeniden Asya politikamız ile eğitim, ticaret, teknoloji, kültür dahil geniş bir yelpazede bölge ülkeleriyle daha yakın işbirliğini hedefliyoruz. Bu işbirliklerimizi Asya Kalkınma Bankası aracılığıyla sürdürmekten çok memnunuz. Bankaya yaptığımız sermaye katkılarımızın ve kaynak aktarımlarının kıtada etkin, şeffaf ve kalkınma etkisi yüksek projelere yönlendirildiğini görmekten memnuniyet duyuyoruz. Özellikle COVID-19 sürecinde bankanın üye ülkelerin salgınla mücadelesinde hızlı ve erken davrandığını biliyoruz. Banka açıkladığı 20 milyar dolarlık destekle katma değeri yüksek bir adım atmıştır. Ayrıca bankanın geleceğe dair rotasını belirleyen Strateji 2030 ile bölgeye katkılarını kapsamlı bir plan dahilinde sürdürdüğünü görüyoruz. Özellikle bu stratejinin siz değerli iş insanlarımızı ilgilendiren boyutuna değinmek isterim. Banka, özel sektör faaliyetlerini önümüzdeki 5 yıl içinde toplam operasyonlarının 1/3'ine yükseltecektir. Dolayısıyla yatırımcılarımız için fırsatlar artıyor ve bunları yakından takip etmekte fayda olacağını düşünüyorum. Türk özel sektörünün Asya için yüksek kalitede hizmet ve ürünleri sağlamak için gerekli tüm teknik ve mali kaynaklara sahip olduğuna eminiz. Özel sektörümüzün bölgedeki iş fırsatlarını her iki tarafın da çıkarına olacak şekilde değerlendirmesini bekliyoruz. Bankaya olan güvenimizin sonucu olarak bugüne kadar olduğu gibi güçlü desteğimizi göstermeye devam edeceğiz. Bankanın iş insanlarımızca bilinirliğini artırmak ve iş fırsatlarından haberdar olmalarını sağlamak için bugünkü etkinliğin benzerlerini yapmaya devam edeceğiz. Bu tür etkinlikler özel sektörümüzün doğrudan banka uzmanlarıyla etkileşime girmesi için önemli fırsatlardır. Asya Kalkınma Bankası'na üye olduğumuz 1991 yılından bu yana iş insanlarımızın bankanın finanse ettiği projelerden aldığı ihale payları açısından oldukça iyi bir noktada olduğumuzu da memnuniyetle ifade etmek isterim. Bugüne kadar Türk firmaları 592 proje ile 3 milyar dolardan fazla ihale kazanarak banka ihaleleri toplamı içinde ilk 10'da yer almayı başarmışlardır. Bu ihalelerin %98'i mal ve yapım işleri iken %2'si danışmanlık hizmetlerinden oluşmaktadır. Bu nedenle danışmanlık hizmetleri alanında şirketlerimizin değerlendirebileceğini düşündüğümüz potansiyel olduğuna inanıyoruz. Ayrıca banka, bölgeye dair veri üreten önemli bir bilgi kaynağıdır. Bu nedenle firmalarımıza bankanın yatırım alanlarına yön veren politikalarını internet sitesinden yakından takip etmelerini de ayrıca tavsiye ediyorum. Değerli katılımcılar, banka ile olan ilişkilerimizi ülkemiz adına pay sahipliğini temsil eden Hazine ve Maliye Bakanlığımız yürütmektedir. Sözlerime burada son verirken banka ile ilgili konularda bakanlığımızla her zaman iletişime geçebileceğinizi de belirtmek isterim. Teşekkürler.
Sayın Serhat Bey, bilgiler için biz de teşekkür ediyoruz sizlere. Eğer sorularımız da olacak olursa sizlere yönlendiririz. Eğer webinar sürecinde gelen sorular olursa da onları da toparlar, sizlere bildirerek bilgi akışını devam ettiririz. Aynı zamanda bakanlığımızın bugünkü webinara göstermiş olduğu ilgi ve desteğe de şahsınızla teşekkür ediyorum. Sayın Serhat Köksal'a teşekkür ettikten sonra Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın destek verdiği projeler ve ihalelere katılma süreçleri konulu konuşmalar öncesinde Asya Kalkınma Bankası hedefleri hakkında detaylı bilgi vermek üzere sözü Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın Tedarik Birimi Direktörü Sayın Rüstem Abdukayumov'a vermek istiyorum. Dear Mr. Rüstem, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Murat. I'm very happy to be here at this event, and good morning to our colleagues in Turkey. Good afternoon to our colleagues in Manila. And I would like to welcome our participants to this first Business Opportunities virtual seminar. And I would like to thank our colleagues from host organization, DEİK, and the Ministry of Treasury and Finance for helping us to organize this event. As was already mentioned, Turkey is one of Adb member countries, and we are working very closely with the Turkish companies in implementing many different types of projects financed by Adb. What is important, I think, to note that, as was also mentioned by Mr. Murat, Turkey is a member, but it's a donor country. So that means Turkey provides money to the capital of Adb, which is then being provided as loans and grants to other countries. So therefore, the opportunities for Turkish companies will be in many countries in Asia who are members of Adb. Unfortunately, because Turkey is a donor country, not a borrowing country, Adb does not have any projects in Turkey itself. So therefore, I hope our participants understand Adb's business model, and we will further explain how to find business opportunities, but all those business opportunities will be outside of Turkey. So for those of you who have been working with Adb, you perhaps know that for the last 10 years, Adb organized the so-called Business Opportunities Fair in Manila. So this is a big forum for consultants, contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, all those who are interested in working with Adb and who are interested in providing goods, works, and services. So we had these big events in Manila for 2 days, and that was a good opportunity for businessmen from different parts of the world to come together to learn how Adb works, but also to basically establish and strengthen their network with other counterparts from other countries. For example, last year when we had the Business Opportunities Fair in Manila, it was attended by more than 1,000 participants. So this was a great success. This year we wanted to build on that experience, and we wanted to move from Manila to one of the regions where Adb operates, and we wanted to organize also a very big event to come closer to actual borrowers, the countries who receive Adb support. So we were hoping that by this we will be able to increase participation from local contractors and manufacturers and consultants from that region. Unfortunately, due to these disruptions caused by COVID-19 and travel restrictions, now we have to postpone this event to a later date, and we will be assessing the situation maybe Q1 next year. We will see if it's still possible to think of organizing such event in 2021, and once we decided if it's possible, of course, we will inform everybody about that. But in the meantime, of course, our goal is to continue our engagement with the consultants, contractors, and suppliers, manufacturers, so that we keep on momentum, we keep our relationship. So that's why this year we decided to move to BOS, which are conducted virtually. Of course, there are pros and cons of conducting virtually. Maybe it does not provide opportunity to meet in person with Adb staff and maybe with other colleagues from the industry as we used to have in Manila. But at the same time, it provides an opportunity for more participants to join. And we have wider agenda because depending on requests from host organizations, we are trying to tailor the seminar to meet their demands. So the topics which are covered come from the participants, whereas in Manila, we had pre-arranged topics and then there was less flexibility. Here in the virtual format, we are more flexible, and we hope that that would meet the demands of host organizations and the consulting and construction industry who are participating in this event. I just wanted to inform you also that currently ADB and our procurement department, which I am representing, are working on enhancing ADB's business outreach website. So we already have a website which contains quite a lot of useful information, but we wanted to spend more efforts to improve its content further so that it's easier to search for business opportunities. And especially because of COVID, there are many new projects, many new initiatives which will provide new opportunities for certain sector, for certain suppliers, certain manufacturers, certain type of consultants to provide goods, materials, and advice, intellectual advice on COVID-related topics. So therefore, we will continue working on improving our website, and we have already agreed that on October 29 this year, we will organize a so-called launch event. This will be also a virtual event where we will present all new features of our website. We will also combine it with the panel discussion representing few ADB management and the representatives from private sector, those who are working with ADB on implementing projects. So that will be kind of interactive discussion. And then also we will provide an overview of ADB's operations in all sectors where we are involved. All our sector groups covering all sectors such as transport, education, water, urban, and so on, energy, will make their own presentations. And because of COVID, there is increased interest in the health sector. So we will also cover ADB's involvement and partnership with other institutions in trying to address COVID-related challenges. So we have already informed ADB's board of directors about this event on 29th October. In a few days, probably next week, we will have a dedicated web page on ADB website where we will provide the preliminary information, and also we will have a link for interested participants to register. So we will be using a Zoom platform. It can accommodate quite many participants. There is no limit to that. So I hope that you will be also able to register and participate in that event. As for today's event, I understand based on requests from our host organizations, we were asked to basically make presentations on quite a broad topic, which is climate change and energy. By itself, these two areas have many dimensions, many aspects. And we will be discussing how they interconnect with each other, climate change and energy. So, and I'm pleased to introduce our speakers from ADB side. First, our speaker will be Frederick Aslin, our principal climate change specialist. And then David Ilzinga, our senior energy specialist. Both of them represent our department, which is called Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. They're all working very closely with thematic groups. So they're basically focusing on those specific areas for ADB's operation across all countries and in all sectors, because, you know, there is a big linkage between climate change and other sectors. The same is energy and other sectors. There is a linkage and there is a mutual impact on that. We will be also discussing about Adb Strategy 2030, because it's our main corporate document, which basically shows direction in which Adb will be working with its partners, with its development member countries, in providing assistance for the next 10 years. So there are clear goals, clear targets, which we have to achieve. And I hope we will be able to do that with your support, with participation from consultants and contractors and other interested parties from Turkey. After these presentations, we will have Jenny Chu, our procurement specialist, who will talk about the Adb Procurement Framework, the processes, the bidding, tendering processes, how to find business opportunities, and then how to prepare quality proposals or quality bids. This is quite important because although we have a lot of information on our website in terms of opportunities, it's also useful to share information and tips on how to prepare the bids so that the chances of winning are much higher for all participants. So therefore, I hope this today workshop or seminar will be very useful for our participants. We'll be taking questions and we'll try to answer all of them today. If for some reason we could not, we will then respond in writing. And we basically thank you, our organization, host organization, for helping us in conducting this event, and we are looking forward to strengthening our cooperation for many, many years in the future. So thank you very much. Wishing everybody a good day.
Dear Mr. Rustam Abdukayumov, thank you very much for your speech. Biz kendisine çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bize hem aydınlatıcı fikirler verdi, hem de aynı zamanda yapmış oldukları ve yapacak olacakları konuşmalardan da bilgi sahibi olduk. Bu seminerlerin şu önemi var. Biz çünkü Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nı belki yeterince tanımıyoruz. Belki yeterince işbirlikleri yapmıyoruz ama biz bunları bu tip oturumlarla geliştirebiliriz. 29 Ekim tabii bizim için çok önemli bir gün. Cumhuriyet Bayramımız o gün. Ama hem bayramımızı hem Cumhuriyet Bayramımızı kutlar hem de aynı zamanda ümit ediyorum ki o oturumda da yine Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nı yakından tanıma fırsatını bulabiliriz. Şimdi bir sonraki konuşmacımıza söz vermeden önce birazcık farklı bir konudan da bahsederek semineri devam ettirmek istiyorum. Bugün baktığınız zaman dünya ülkeleri COVID-19 salgınıyla hakikaten mücadele içinde ve bu salgından sağlıklı bir şekilde çıkmaya çalışıyorlar. Ancak göz ardı edilmemesi gereken çok ciddi bir gerçek olan iklim değişikliği sorunu da yanı başımızda duruyor. Ve bu soruna karşı da ulusal ve uluslararası boyutta bir işbirliği gerekiyor. Birleşmiş Milletler iklim raporuna göre Asya Pasifik bu konuda çok riskli olan bir bölge. Zira bölgede deniz seviyesinin aşağısında çok fazla yer de bulunuyor. Çok miktarda sahile yakın evler, yerleşim yerleri de var. Örnek olarak Bangkok, Jakarta ve Manila gibi başlıca Asya şehirleri de deniz seviyesinin yükselmesiyle birlikte su altında kalma tehlikesinde taşıyor. Örneğin bugün Endonezya'nın başkenti Jakarta'nın Kalimantan'a taşınmasının nedenlerinden biri olarak iklim değişikliği görülüyor. Büyük ve gelişen ekonomilerin olduğu Asya Pasifik bölgesinde yoğun kömür kullanımı da bu duruma olumsuz etki ediyor. Asya Pasifik bölgesinde dünyadaki karbon salımının yarısından fazlası gerçekleşiyor. Ülkemiz hakkında da bilgi vermek gerekirse, Türkiye'de yenilebilir enerjinin birinci enerjiye kullanımındaki payı %6.5. Elektrik üretimindeki payı ise %24 oranında. Ülkemizde enerjide dönüşümün sağlanması adına önemli yatırımlar da gerçekleştiriliyor. Ayrıca Türkiye'nin 2023 enerji stratejisi kapsamında yenilebilir enerjinin elektrik üretimindeki payının da %30'a çıkarılması hedefleniyor. Ülkemiz son 18 yılda yıllık ortalama %6.1'lik kurulu güç artışıyla OECD ülkeleri arasında da ilk sırada yer alıyor. İklim değişikliği ülkelerde tarım üretimini de olumsuz yönde etkiliyor. Ve dünyanın bazı yerlerinde pek çok insanın yetersiz beslenmesine veya üretimin bozulmasına yol açıyor. Bu da zincirleme olarak sağlık harcamalarının artmasına, sistemin bozulmasına ve eşitsizliklerin artmasına neden oluyor. İklim değişikliği sebebiyle doğal afetlerin, yıkıcılığın ve sayısının arttığı bir dönemden geçiyoruz. 2050'ye kadar iklim mültecilerinin sayısının da 200 milyona kadar ulaşılabileceği öngörülüyor. Birleşmiş Milletler 13. Sürdürülebilir Kalkınma Hedefi'nin de belirttiği gibi sıfır karbon ekonomisine geçişi oluşturan tek çözüm uluslararası koordinasyon ve çok taraflı kurumların özel sektörlerle birlikte çalışmasından geçiyor. Sorunun çözümü için uzmanlar tarafından hızlı dekarbonizasyon, en savunmasızları da korumaya yönelik uyarlama önlemleri, yenilebilir enerjiye odaklanan projeler, altyapı, taşımacılıkta yenilikler öneriliyor. Sürdürülebilir kalkınma hedeflerine ulaşmak için özel sektörün de harekete geçmesini bekliyor ve bu konuda teşvikler her gün artıyor. Bu kapsamda Asya Kalkınma Bankası 2014 yılında 3 milyar dolar tutarındaki yıllık iklim yatırımlarını 2019 yılına geldiğimizde 6 milyar doların da üzerine çıkarmayı hedefliyor ve bunu çıkarmış durumda. Yani refah seviyesi yüksek, dirençli ve sürdürülebilir bir yapıya sahip bir kıta çalışmalarını sürdürüyor. Bunlara da destek oluyor. Şimdi bu konuya ilişkin mevcut ve önümüzdeki dönem projelerine yönelik bilgileri almak üzere Asya Kalkınma Bankası İklim Değişikliği Baş Uzmanı Frederick Einstein'a sözü vermek istiyorum. Floor is yours, dear Frederick.
Yes, hello, can you see and hear me?
Yes, Frederick.
So I'm going to share my screen to share the presentation.
Sure.
Can you all see it?
Yes, Frederick.
Can you see the
Yes, yeah, this is on the screen.
Yes? Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm normally based in Manila. I'm currently based in France, so slightly same time zone as colleagues in Istanbul. It's my pleasure to addressing this audience again. I had the privilege of coming already last year in November with our Deputy Director General Ashraf Mohammed to conduct a similar exercise, and that one was live. We are now adapting to the virtual world realities. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of what Adb is doing in the climate change and sustainable development sphere. It's going to be a broad overview. Obviously, as was mentioned by previous speakers, this tackles a number of important topics and subsectors, of which energy is one, and I will let my colleague David go deeper into what we're doing in energy. Prior to starting the presentation, I'd just like to frame in the context also of what was expressed previously, the challenge of the recovery of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have published a number of dedicated strategic, conceptual papers, publications in order to assist our member countries with the recovery from COVID, from the pandemic, and try and explain how this was in fact not a single element, not a single event, but something that really is anchored in an overall crisis that is bigger than COVID, and that is part of what we're going to face for the years to come. So we had instruments in 2015, the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, the Sustainable Development Goals that are known to all. Sendai is on disaster risk management specifically. Paris is on the climate nationally determined contributions and the pathways to remaining below 1.5 degrees. We're hit by the crisis, and how do we respond? We have a way to use this crisis as an opportunity to put in place some of the solutions we had already identified prior to the 2019 crisis. And this ADB had put in place already within its strategic framework, within the climate change operations framework. It has to do with resilience. It has to do with reinforcing health systems and social networks that help the poor, to help the vulnerable cope with risks, catastrophic risks and pandemics, and the spread of pandemics through water contaminations at city level, as we are witnessing in the Philippines and in other member countries of the ADB, is of the essence and may not stop with COVID-19. So the quicker we actually put in place these mechanisms, the better we will be equipped for future responses. So I just wanted to make these few points prior to starting the actual presentation of what ADB is doing at the corporate level. We have had a very important a response package to support health systems in our member countries, above $20 billion by now. But in addition to this, is the immediate need to assist the members with failing health systems and with immediate assistance for populations in need, obviously. We also need to think about ways to anchor the long-term response and how we're going to make best use of the fiscal stimulus packages that are being developed both in donor countries such as Turkey, to the ADB, and both in recipient countries. There is a number of large packages at EU level, the IMF, member countries of the EU each came up with significant fiscal stimulus packages. Members in our region, developing member countries also have developed their own stimulus packages. The question is, how do we actually accompany this to invest this public money in a way that helps us improve resilience, improve investments in low carbon and green recoveries? And how do we learn from what happened during the financial crisis in 2008, when only about 16 to 17% of public fiscal stimulus packages were invested in green, and then they were invested in a pipeline that ended with the projects. There were no structural changes to the financial system, to the carrying capacity of the overall financial framework. So we need to think across the board from east to west how to actually reinforce these financial frameworks so that we can in the future channel more of this public money into resilience. And obviously the second very important aspect, as was also mentioned in introductory remarks, is how do we associate the private sector? We have started doing this at the ADB a number of years ago. We have been putting in place innovative projects to de-risk low carbon and climate resilient technologies. So this is what I will describe briefly in the rest of the presentation. It is important to note, as was also stated at the Petersburg Climate Change Dialogue in April, May this year, that the decisions really taken today will have consequences for generations to come. There is a lot of public money, there's a lot of the billions available on the table. It is very important to make the right calls to shape these investments. Obviously, on the low carbon pathway side, there is a lot that needs to be done in energy, and this David will go into in more detail. That includes energy efficient buildings, it includes storage, it includes transmission, distribution. It may include hydrogen that is increasingly taking center stage, water management, water efficiency, waste to energy issues, and so forth. It is important to de-risk innovation and attract the private sector, of which a number of representatives are with us today, to this effort. I'm now turning to the presentation proper, and this is an outline of what I'd like to describe. I think I may leave the last one, the case study on Shandong, for later, because I only have 15 minutes I'm aware of, and so depending on time and on demand, I will go into details or not. So a brief overview of the challenge in the region, how ADB is tackling the challenge, what it means and how it translates in terms of finance, the climate and disaster risk management finance that we allocate to addressing the challenge, a few innovative projects and innovative initiatives. And then I had a more detailed overview of an example of how we've associated the private sector with what we do on sovereign side to de-risk innovation, and that's an example from China. So overall, the challenge in the region most of the emissions from the world come from the Asia region, 43% compared to 57% for the rest of the world. And the share coming from this region, Asia, is growing, pushed by obviously China and India and Indonesia, the largest emitters in the Asia region. This also is combined with vulnerability of the region to disasters, particularly the Philippines. We're all aware there of typhoons, occurrences of flash floods and tectonic movements. This has a cost. This has a cost across the region. Different countries face different challenges in terms of water scarcity, in terms of drought, in terms of impacts of water shortages on the energy sector, on the overall infrastructure. We did a study from the late 90s to 2018, so just a span of not even 10 years, and realized as you can see on the slide, the cost to the in direct physical losses reaching almost $1 trillion, and the number of people affected over 5 billion for the region. Okay, sorry, I'm trying. Yeah, so are we on track to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement? We are not. If we were, on a path consistent with 1.5 degrees increasing global temperatures, we would need to implement nationally determined contributions as they were pledged in Paris and as they're being revisited today. But the gap between where we should be and where we are today is increasing in a direction that is not the one it should be going to. So the more reason to revisit the way we're doing business in the years that are going to follow the recovery, hopefully, from the current situation. If you look at trends in Asia, a lot is being done in China. For instance, yesterday, China just announced that they're going to they're going to aim to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. That is an ambitious goal, given how much coal they still have in the overall energy system, both for heat and electricity. If you look at the second graph, the current policies show you how much more CO2 we're emitting, the red dotted line, and the Paris Agreement being the solid yellow line. And with nationally determined contributions, meaning this is a pledge by countries to reduce emissions by sector, we end up somewhere in the middle. So we are not reaching Paris targets as of now, obviously. What is ADB doing? How is ADB tackling this regional challenge? As was mentioned, we have an Adb Strategy 2030 that was approved by the board last year. One of the pillars of the strategy is to tackle climate change and enhancing environmental sustainability. Within the strategy, we have established, adopted a target for ADB climate finance, meaning the resources from ADB directly accounted for as climate finance to reach 80 billion by 2030 in cumulative terms. So it means about 6 to 7 billion a year from now until 2030. And we have a qualitative also objective in addition to the overall volume. We want to see 75% of operations being aligned with climate mitigation and adaptation objectives. This means we don't want one sector to take it over. We do not want a few very large projects to account for the objective, for the target, but would like to see climate considerations across the board and resilience consideration across the board, and the way we design and frame projects to take on resilience across the sectors and across the investments we develop at the ADB. The current target we had for this year, we have reached. This was in the Climate Change Operations Framework. So this was prior to the Strategy 2030. We had a target of 6 billion. We have reached that target, meaning 6 billion this year. And we're going to try and maintain this level of climate finance until 2030 so as to reach 80 in cumulative terms. This was about 4 billion in mitigation, so what has to do with the low carbon pathways, and 2 billion on the adaptation side, what has to do with that, the resilience aspects. In the future and in the light of post-COVID demand from our member countries, the adaptation side may need to be increased in terms of stresses to health systems and cities in particular, and abilities of the most vulnerable in cities in our member countries to cope with the effects of climate risk. So clean energy in this effort is pivotal, and David after me will expand on what ADB is doing in this sphere. Obviously, sustainable urban development, as I said, is also pivotal, not just because of the infrastructure and the need to invest in low carbon infrastructure, but also because of the resilience aspects. And it's in cities that diseases spread. COVID is an example, and it will spread amongst most vulnerable populations, amongst the urban poor in peri-urban areas. We were already obviously active in this sphere prior to COVID. We have redirected a lot of the resources in the past months to addressing the demand, the needs of these populations, peri-urban poor, and more certainly will be done in future months and years. Climate smart agriculture was always an area of focus of the ADB in terms of adaptation and mitigation and co-benefits approaches, also involving the private sector. Sustainable transport, I am not sure we'll have time to focus on it today, but some of it obviously also links to urban development and energy, new technologies such as hydrogen being, increasingly considered as center stage technologies, notably in China, in the Asia region. The global approach, as I said, is not just about looking at the physical. It's also looking at ecology, nature-based type of solutions to integrate aspects that have to do with precisely, what this current pandemic can teach us. We're in need of developing financial solutions, quick dispersing funds for people affected so that they can benefit from assistance there within a very short time. This was particularly put in place for vulnerable populations on coastal areas, in islands, in the Pacific, in the Philippines, when it comes to responding to disasters in the shortest possible time. The social and institutional aspects, as I've just mentioned, COVID has taught us that this is indeed an integral, essential pillar of the strategy. When we look at resilience, we need to look at all these four aspects together. How does it translate in terms of money? As I said, in 2020, we have reached 6 billion target. This is how it looked before. So we have actually reoriented ADB's delivery on climate finance significantly towards reaching our objective. Our goal is to maintain this 7 billion a year climate finance target over the next decade to reach the overall target of 80 by 2030. This compares to a slightly higher target for the World Bank, for instance, but the World Bank is bigger, and they also do more in adaptation, notably in Africa. What we have to see is we have done so far a lot on mitigation. We have done a lot on energy projects, on large transportation projects. The future potentially will see us do more on the resilience and adaptation side because the demand is shifting and therefore resources available will be shifting also this way, but this won't affect the overall target, just a mix of resilience versus low carbon. How do we mobilize climate finance? There are a number of concessional resources that are available within the ADB, meaning these are trust funds that we do manage at ADB. These trust funds are invested by donor countries that are external to the ADB. One of them, the Climate Change Fund, the Clean Energy Financing Partnership Facility, the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund. This is a very large trust fund that we are managing, that is invested by DFID from the UK. The Rockefeller Foundation is doing a lot on precisely the issue that is occupying a lot of our teams today, adaptation to COVID in the cities. Asia, and there are lots of opportunities in the urban sphere also that might be of interest to the audience today. The Asia Pacific Climate Finance Fund is a new initiative that we're driving within the climate change division that is looking at de-risking and proposing innovative finance such as guarantees and such to low carbon and DRM type of projects. There are external funds that are managed by others. The climate investment funds are very large, managed by the World Bank in Washington, DC. You may already be familiar with the CIF. The Climate Technology Fund, CTF, is a sub-fund of this. This is in the billions, 8 billion. The Global Environment Facility is an older facility since the Rio Summit, also managed out of Washington, DC. Green Climate Fund is a more recent initiative that came about after the Paris Agreement, the COP in Paris, that has a goal of dispersing up to $100 billion a year in climate aligned infrastructure. This goal has not yet been reached, but it is an interesting fund with a taxonomy that they have put in place, a green investment framework that helps actually account for what is indeed climate finance and what is regular development finance. We're also working with markets where we have a team dedicated to carbon finance, to developing carbon markets. We have bilateral initiatives, notably with Japan, on joint crediting mechanisms with Japan and the country we would invest in within ADB MDBs. We're issuing bonds, climate bonds, green bonds, social bonds. We are also acting as anchors to sort of testify to the validity of bonds issued by others. So if ADB buys a share of a bond issued by another, it is a way of attesting that it is indeed legitimate as green. Other certifiers, such as the Climate Bonds Initiative, will provide certification of issuances. We do that also, and we issue our own through the treasury of the ADB. And then we work with the private sector to catalyze private capital. So we do this through innovative financing facilities, through co-financing, through blended finance. We also have a dedicated department for public-private partnerships. I will go a little bit more into this, but I don't want to spend too much more time on these details. As I said, CIF, very large. A lot of this money actually funds the TA, the preparation of the projects that will lead to large investments. So it's through these sources that opportunities arise for consultants to work with us in everything that has to do with technical assistance, but also the preparation of larger investments. Once larger investments roll out, then there are very large contracts coming out. But at the preparation stage, these trust funds, be they managed by the ADB or external to the ADB, is the resources we use to structure new projects. This is an example of how we've done with the Green Climate Fund, about $500 million US out of 5.6 committed, so $500 million with the ADB. We've had a number of successes there. The most notable one was last year, the Shandong Green Development Fund that I wanted to discuss a little bit more because it was the first China project. But we had a very, I think, nice spread of projects approved by the GCF from the Pacific to Southeast Asia to Central West. So a number of our member countries were successful in receiving co-financing from the GCF, be it for mitigation, adaptation, or co-benefit projects. We have dedicated trust funds, as I said, for disaster risk, notably for the Pacific. We have a number of these resources. This is just one example that is supported by Ireland, but we do have a number of similar facilities to support resilience in the Pacific. The Asia Pacific Climate Finance Fund, as I mentioned earlier, is an innovative fund to help de-risk new products, new technologies, new financial projects, guarantees, risk mitigation mechanisms. This is invested by Germany for now, but it's meant to grow to about 100 million US dollars, managed directly by the ADB, obviously dedicated to two countries in the Asian region. But there might be opportunities for consultants in Turkey and elsewhere to contribute expertise in financial risk management. This is a quick overview of the pipeline we currently have with ACLIF, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, the Pacific, Philippines, and regional facilities. Most of it is right now focused on DRM and is likely to continue given the COVID angle that most of our operations have now to integrate. We have a number of funds that work directly with the private sector in the climate change area. One such fund, and the first one that was such a fund, was invested by Canada, Canadian Climate Fund for the Private Sector in Asia. It's number two. Number one was actually directly managed by Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. This is now managed directly by PSOD, our private sector operations. It's ADB's IFC, the International Finance Corporation, that is a private arm of the World Bank Group. We have a similar structure that is integrated within the ADB called PSOD, Private Operations Department. And with them, we look at projects that will blend money from the private sector, an equity stake, a commercial bank, a loan from PSOD, from ADB Private, and cheaper money from a fund such as the Canadian Fund to make the deal more attractive for commercial investors. So meaning without this attractivity in terms of the tenor and the pricing of the loan that is concessional and blended with resources from ADB and from the project sponsors, without this structure, the deal probably wouldn't happen. So these are projects that are sourced by private teams, private sector teams, and that do blend public and private money. This is increasingly taking relevance in what we do at ADB. We have a second fund now by Australia that is focused on areas that obviously the Pacific is always one of them with Australia, but we also have a focus on Thailand, on Indonesia, the big UMIX in Southeast Asia, so also Vietnam. So also one to keep in mind in terms of a future business that has a private sector focus. So one of the innovative initiatives, for instance, that we developed with the private sector operations department was in Cambodia. There we used the climate investment funds, the CIF I described earlier, that are managed out of Washington, DC. There is a window, means a sub-share of this money that is managed by a team at ADB, approached by a team working on the sovereign side in Cambodia. There was an idea to develop a 100 megawatt utility scale solar PV wind farm, solar PV farm. This was through a sovereign effort, and then we added to this through the Canadian Climate Change Fund to bring in the private sector operations department for the second phase of the project. And this was an example of a successful cooperation between, the PSOD, the private sector operation branch, the Office of Public Partnerships, the Southeast Asian department on the sovereign side in coming up with an innovative project that actually staged an auction to attract bidders with a reservation price on a tariff to actually come up with the best possible tariff for the end user. This was developed with Électricité du Cambodge in Phnom Penh 2 years ago. It is now reaching maturity. I mean, it's ready for prime time. Shandong, I think I'll just give you a snapshot on this slide and avoid going into the details of the full case study because it will take too long. In a nutshell, what we did in Shandong is Part of it is co-financing from the sovereign side. So there's 100 million from the Asian Development Bank sovereign, East Asia regional department, meaning China and Mongolia. We had about the same from Agence Française, the French development agency, about the same 100 million from KfW, the German development bank. To this, we added another 180 million, of which the first tranche was approved last year at the GCF was 100 million. So this Green Climate Fund. The innovation there was to come up with a pool of sovereign money, 500 million, that applied the investment framework designed by the GCF to a pipeline of forthcoming projects in Shandong province in mitigation and adaptation areas. The GCF framework was actually endorsed by all the co-financiers. So this allows us to push the envelope into financing projects that are greener than what would otherwise be financed by ADB. And the sovereign money is then taken on by the Chinese Ministry of Finance, funneled through to the provincial level in Shandong, where it is matched by provincial money and going into a facility that attracts then commercial, private, institutional, and commercial money to a level that has reached now 1.3 billion US dollars. And this money will support investments in projects that are at the same time low carbon and climate resilience, following a framework that is the one that was set up by the Green Climate Fund. This was quite innovative. And over the full lifetime of the fund, 20 to 25 years, this 1.3 million could be leveraged up to a level of 8 to 9 billion in total investments. So the way it works is we use cheaper money. If the technology is extremely innovative, the pricing is the best, the interest is the lowest, the tenor is the longest, and thereby we do attract commercial players to developing, say, a hydrogen project or solar PV. There are all sorts of road charging station. There are projects in adaptation. There are projects that have to do with sponge cities and flash floods in China. China is going very fast in its technology development. So this is about catching. It's not about developing research and development. It's about pushing technologies that are commercial grade, but need a little bit of de-risking to attract commercial players. The Chinese investors themselves have adopted the framework. And given the scale that everything can take in China, if this is successful, replication of a similar mechanism in other provinces or indeed in other countries in the region is very interesting. So we're watching this one. CICC is the largest international grade investment bank in China, invested by Morgan Stanley, is actually managing the fund. So we have really a top-notch management on this. And we do hope that it will be perenne and inspire similar initiative. One of such similar initiatives is now being developed in Indonesia with PTSMI, the Infrastructure Development Bank in Jakarta, where under the largest trust fund, the larger trust fund on SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, it's called SDG Investor One, was set up about 3 years ago. It's in the billions. And it's managed by PTSMI, and the World Bank is part of this, and ADB and many others in KfW and AFD and such. We have set up a window to develop green finance framework with a taxonomy of eligible projects that is similar to what we have done in Shandong. The principle is the same, only we're not doing it yet with the GCF this time. We're doing a phase one without the GCF. ADB is putting 600 million in a staged disbursement mechanism for this Indonesian project. We have already developed another one at the regional level called the ASEAN Green Financing Facility, that is also a de-risking fund that grew from the proceeds of the former ASEAN Infrastructure Fund that is owned by ASEAN member countries. That was managed by the ADB, that invested billions in infrastructure and co-financing with ADB resources. There was about 100 million, 70 million left in this fund that we use to grow a second fund or follow-up to the initial fund that is focused on green finance, following a framework of eligible projects similarly to the Shandong case, but not using the GCF. This time we use the taxonomy inspired from what the EU is doing. The green taxonomy at the European Union is one of the most complex and complete in the world. So we have adapted parts of this to define eligibility criteria for projects that would receive concessional green subsidized investments from the fund in ASEAN countries. This is also quite large, 1.7 billion today with, in addition to the ADB, the Korean government has put a lot of money, 350 million. The European Investment Bank is part of this effort. And again, the German KfW and other players. We are also working with the European Commission to help structure and source deals with BNP Paribas in London. It's very important to put a lot of effort into actually structuring the pipeline and sourcing eligible projects. The concept we've developed in Shandong is already getting traction in the region, and in the current context, this one I will skip. I think it is very important to associate the private sector into facilities that de-risk innovation in both resilience and low carbon. And in the taxonomies that we put in place when it comes to actually changing a financial system and routing the innovation into a carrying system that will outlast the recovery packages, I think it's extremely important that regional bodies such as the ASEAN do work with the European Union or with players at the EIB or with players at the World Bank IFC in agreeing on what the regulations are going to be that are driving future green and climate finance. So it's not just a project issue, it's not even just a facility issue, it's really a systemic issue in having policies, regulations, regulatory frameworks, central banks, adapting to channeling the recovery effort in a way that also includes the private sector. I'm not going to go into these things, and I'm not going to do the case study because I just mentioned Shandong in quite some detail. So I will stop here in the interest of time, and hopefully we can discuss further during the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Dear Frederick, thank you very much for your whole presentation. Birçok verimli bilgiyi öğrenmiş ve aslında görmüş olduk. Öğrenmiş olduk diyorum çünkü bunları bir kısmını biz ne kadar bu toplantıları yapsak, takip etsek de ben de ilk defa duydum. Tabii burada aslında bizim daha ileride görmek istediğimizde buradaki Türkiye'de yapılan örneklerin artması, Türkiye'yi de orada görmek istiyoruz. Peki Asya Pasifik bölgesindeki enerji ihtiyacının 2030 yılında 2'ye katlanılacağı ve 200 milyon kişinin elektriğe ve 1,7 milyardan fazla kişinin temiz gıdaya erişiminin de olamayacağı öngörülüyor. Asya Kalkınma Bankası bu kapsamda enerji verimliliği ve yenilebilir enerjinin kullanımını teşvik etmek, herkesin enerjiye ulaşımının sağlanması, enerji sektöründeki reform ve kapasite gelişiminin sağlanması, idare edilmesine yönelik politikalar da geliştiriyor. Ve 2008 yılından 2019 yılına kadar bu alanda 23 milyar dolardan daha fazla yatırımda gerçekleştirdi. Geçtiğimiz Haziran ayında gerçekleşen Asya Temiz Enerji Forumu'nda konuşma yapan Asya Kalkınma Bankası Başkanı Masatsuga Asagawa, COVID-19 ile birlikte iklim değişikliği ve enerji konularının daha fazla zorlayıcı hale geldiğini ama Asya Pasifik bölgesinin bu süreçten daha güçlü çıkmasını sağlamak için temiz enerji konusunun büyük önem taşıdığına da dikkat çekti ki sunumlarda da bunu görebiliyoruz. Aynı forumda konuşan Uluslararası Enerji Ajansı İcra Direktörü Fatih Birol, iyileşme sürecinde iklim değişikliği ve hava kirliliği konularına daha fazla odaklanması gerektiğine de vurgu yaptı. Dolayısıyla bizler de farkındayız. Şimdi hepimiz enerjiden konuşuyoruz. Ama bizlerin de, yani bu paneli yapanların da bir enerji ihtiyacı var. Dolayısıyla ben de Türk kahvemi içerek sağlıklı bir enerjimi alıyorum ve sözü hep birlikte yine Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın kıdemli enerji direktörü David Elzinga'ya bırakıyorum. Dear David, floor is yours. I got my coffee. I'm gonna listen to you.
Great. Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for the organizers who have put this together. It's my pleasure to speak today on the energy sector work of the Asian Development Bank. Now, I will turn off my my video just to reduce bandwidth while I'm speaking, and today I'd like to share the work that Adb does in the energy sector, and so you can help understand the work that we do and the focus that we put in it. Now, I just want to confirm that you can see my slides on the screen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. I'm on my screen. I'm having a little trouble getting to the full screen, but as long as you can see them, I will simply continue. For the outline of my presentation, I'd like to highlight just the energy mix in Asia, developing Asia, what our guiding principles are and how we look at the energy sector. Share a little bit about the past investments that we have made, as well as looking to the future. And lastly, some opportunities for developing Asia and the clean energy transition, linking very much to the presentation by my colleague from climate change, Frederick. So if we look at the progress and challenges in the Asia Pacific where Adb invests, they are on track in meeting SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal 7 for energy access, for electricity access, I should say. But in terms of clean cooking and other types of energy access, they are not on track, and many countries have a large share of population that are not able to access clean cooking technologies. There's still a high share of coal power generation in Asia, and more than 60% in some parts in East, Southeast, and South Asia, and in the Pacific, a high share of oil for power generation. So in these regions, we see some rather significant challenges to move to clean energy, just simply because the high shares of fossil fuels used in their energy mix, and especially in the power sector. For meeting their nationally determined contribution, so the agreements for the climate summit, the Paris Agreement, most countries cannot meet them without economic support. And therefore, that is why it's very important for the role of Adb to support them in deploying clean energy technologies, as well as other multilateral organizations. And secondly, Asia's coal fleet is quite young. And so even if we don't invest in new coal power, for one example, or other fossil fuels, the existing infrastructure will last for quite a long time. So new technologies will be needed in order for them to meet these goals. Now, as part of Adb's energy investments, we rely on an energy policy, and our last energy policy was published in 2009, and there have been many changes for that since that time. So we have seen a significant reduction in the costs of renewable energy, and we're seeing emerging new and innovative technologies such as energy storage, electric vehicles, smart grid technologies that are coming forward and giving us new options to invest in the energy sector. Also, from the global debate, the Sustainable Development Goals, with a key focus on Sustainable Development Goal 7, have been published, and globally there are countries are working towards meeting those goals, as well as the Paris Agreement with the nationally determined contributions. We have seen a greater will to move towards clean energy and low carbon energy systems. So that has very much changed since 2009. And as well, as mentioned earlier, ADB has published their strategy 2030, and therefore we are changing how we do our work. And from that perspective, we are currently updating our energy policy. We're going through that now, but we are seeing countries having a stronger interest to move towards low carbon energy systems. So in this context, our guiding principles are following the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and Strategy 2030. And we are seeing an increased deployment of renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we're pushing these technologies. We're trying to integrate more innovative technologies and business models and financing instruments. So we're finding that we're not just deploying technology now, we're also using policy-based loans, where we're helping countries adjust their policy so that they can bring in more low carbon energy sources. And secondly, working with them to create an enabling regulatory framework. So sometimes the existing regulations don't allow, say, small-scale solar technologies. We're helping them change their regulations so that they can encourage more low-carbon energy and clean energy technologies. When we look to our strategy 2030, this is a lot of information on this slide, but the overall strategy for ADB doesn't talk about energy specifically in what we call our operational priorities. Those are the items on the right side of the slide. But you'll see, let me give example, OP1 is addressing remaining poverty and reducing inequalities, or OP3, tackling climate change and building disaster resilience. What we see is that the work that we do in the energy sector touches on all these operational priorities, and especially operational priority 3, tackling climate change and building disaster resilience. Energy is a key priority in that area, as well as many of the others. So these are guiding us in terms of the types of projects that we want to support to help our developing member countries. So when we look at an energy project and we shape and design this project, we ask a number of questions. And we say, okay, how does this contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal 7 in terms of universal energy access? For instance, the number of households that are connected either to electricity, or how are we bringing clean cooking technologies or more energy efficiency to our countries, and do that through individual households or buildings. We look at how it supports countries in their contributions and agreements, or their contributions to the Paris Agreement. We try to align with our ADB climate finance targets that Frederick had talked about earlier. We try to make sure that every project adopts some level of advanced technologies or new business models. So we want countries to continue to progress in their energy sector development. And then, of course, how do we contribute to ADB's strategy 2030? When we look at the past investments that we've made in the energy sector, we see that's the orange line on the graph. We see it goes up and down every year, and because some of our investments are rather large or lumpy, we see some years are higher than other years. But then we're also looking at, we measure our how much our investments are in clean energy. And our goal several years ago was to invest in 2 billion per year, and up to 2017, we had reached that goal very well for several years. And that's going down now slightly, and I'll highlight why that is shortly. And in terms of where we invest in the energy sector, overall, ADB, the energy sector, overall lending, energy sector represents just under 25%, and that's very consistent. It goes up and down from year to year. Then within that, on average, clean energy represents 45%. And then the other remaining 55% is in transmission and distribution and other technologies, such as in the past, fossil-based power generation. We do less of that now. We still do invest in natural gas power, but not coal power generation anymore. And then in terms of the clean energy, a large share of that was in renewable power. And another large share is in energy efficiency, and then a small amount in fuel switching. And that could be, examples could be from going from coal to natural gas, or co-firing with biomass are some of the areas where fuel switching comes in. In terms of where we invest, the orange table there highlights the different regions where we invest. And so Central West Asia, East Asia, the Pacific, which is the small islands. PSOD, as Frederick had highlighted, is our private sector division. South Asia, Southeast Asia. So we see our larger regions are South Asia, Central West, and East Asia. Southeast Asia is a very important region for development for the ADB. What we found in the past several years is that we have not invested a lot in the energy sector there. We're expecting significant investments to continue there in the future. So in terms of, I wanted to highlight why we've seen our clean energy investments decrease. And what you'll see on a global basis is the positive development has been the declining cost of renewables, especially solar, but also wind. And so therefore we've seen those investments have decreased just by nature of the prices coming down. And secondly, because the prices have coming down, those technologies have now become more bankable, and therefore there is a significant increase in commercial banks and reduction of subsidies for most countries, and therefore countries have been able to invest it with banks, but also there is some risks that we're seeing in that area, and therefore haven't been able to invest in that. Secondly, we are trying to now increase into the more difficult areas, which is solar rooftop systems, which are often less bankable at large scale, and also looking at mini grids and more using solar power and other renewables to support access to energy. And these areas are challenging, but that's where ADB works and can provide the most benefit to our developing member countries. Looking forward, we see that a large energy sector lending program in the next few years. We expect it to be in the scale of 6 billion a year, and clean energy will represent around 40% of that in our pipeline, and transmission and distribution around 43%. And we still see some investment in the gas sector, around 1 billion per year going forward. Now, in the COVID challenge, I'll touch on that a little bit more shortly as well, but has made it more difficult for some of our lending, but still we are pushing our pipelines in 2020 in one sense to make sure that the countries continue to invest in their energy sector. This is a large need, but also to put money into those economies. And we expect that there will be more investments in that area during the recovery phase as well. This is a very full graph, but you will receive this presentation, but I simply wanted to highlight the different areas where we will be investing in the future, and this may allow you to identify areas where Turkish companies can be involved. Again, what is clear is we see a large amount of investment, around over 50% in transmission and distribution. This is an area where Adb makes significant investments. I just wanted to highlight as well the innovation challenge that we have just done. We're looking for new ways to support countries in new energy technology, and that also means looking for new ways for Adb to make those investments. So we ran a challenge where we were looking for countries to submit proposals on clean heating and efficient cooling, sustainable renewable energy-based microgrids, artificial intelligence for energy demand management, as well as clean and disease resilient centralized air conditioning in public buildings. And what we did in this competition is we gave each company, or the four winners, we gave them $500,000 each to invest towards a feasibility study or demonstration project. So it was a way for us to contribute and support innovative technologies and ideas. Other work that we do in the energy sector, and there are often consulting opportunities when we develop these products, is we have developed several technical handbooks on new energy technologies, so microgrids, waste to energy, and energy storage. Microgrids and energy storage are completed. We're currently just publishing on waste to energy. And then also we try to publish different op-eds or blogs to highlight the work in the energy sector in developing member countries. Lastly, just to highlight some of the challenges that we've seen specific to the energy sector and the related emissions. COVID has resulted in significant decrease in emissions based on reduced electricity demand and transport. So this is very positive, but we do expect a rebound. So we don't see a structural change, and that goes to, again, how can we go forward and hopefully make those structural changes to reduce emissions. We've seen electricity demand drop significantly, on average 20% globally. Some countries it's been greater, some less. And the share of fossil fuels has gone down, but we've seen renewables actually has increased in its generation in developed countries. And that's mainly because we've seen the priority dispatch. But this is interesting to see how renewables can contribute to keeping the lights on. Renewable energy projects have suffered delays, and that's mainly because of the international staff that are supporting these deployments have not been able to get there, and as well supply chain constraints. But there is definitely an opportunity to remove fossil subsidies and introduce carbon prices because of the reduction in fossil fuel prices. So this has been, we see some challenges, but also some opportunities in the due to the COVID pandemic. So I want to pause there. You will have access to this presentation. What I have highlighted just in the rest is a number of innovative projects in different parts of Asia. So in Uzbekistan, in China, small island project in Tonga, Bangladesh, Cambodia, which Frederick highlighted, as well as in Afghanistan. But that just gives an idea of some of the countries that we work in and the types of projects, and happy to answer any questions you may have on those in the Q&A period. But thank you. So I hope this provides a nice introduction to the work that ADB does in developing Asia. So I pass it back to our host. Thank you.
Dear David, thank you very much. David Elzinga'ya teşekkür ediyoruz sunumu için, detaylı bilgiler için de. Ve toplantımıza devam ediyoruz. Ve şu ana kadar da uzmanlarımız bizlere çok değerli bilgiler, sektörlere yönelik de öngörüler sundular. Proje fırsatlarını sunuyorlar. Ve bu arada tabii sizlerden de sorular geliyor. Onları da en son bölümde cevaplamaya çalışacağız. Ve şimdi de Sayın Jenny Yan Yi Chu'ya sözü bırakmak istiyorum. Tedarik süreçleri hakkında kendisinin bir sunumu olacak, bir paylaşımı olacak. Şimdi Sayın Chu'yu dinliyoruz. Floor is yours, Ms. Chu.
Good day, everyone. I hope you have find the information that's being shared as useful. I just want to check that people can hear me okay before I share the screen to go through my part of the presentation.
We can hear you very clear.
Okay, very good. I will now do the screen sharing and also turn off the video in the meantime.
Okay.
Okay, so my part of the presentations will cover three key topics. Firstly, a little bit about ADB operations procurement in general, then how to access business opportunities with ADB, and some update on our procurement system and procedures, and some associated tips on submission for bids and proposals. So as mentioned by the earlier speakers, ADB's key strategy and core business is through supporting our development members country through technical assistance, loan and grant, and also through knowledge and partnership facilitation supported by the financing. We have a huge pipeline of projects underway. And the key type of business opportunities are good and civil works and non-consulting services and consulting services. And those are the two groups that you might be hearing me referring to in the rest of the presentations. The good civil works and non-consulting services are largely administered or contracted by the borrower's country as the client, and consulting services can be contracted by both ADB or the borrower's member's country. The graph here sort of gives you a snapshot on the makeup of our sectors in terms of portfolio makeup. You can see that transport and energy are the majority of the ADB operations portfolio for self-run operations, and it also consists of other sectors such as public management, education, agricultural, natural resources, water, and urban infrastructures. Our earlier speakers spoke about climate change and energy, and it's certainly an emerging theme that is very important in the future pipeline of ADB and is core to ADB Strategy 2030. The graphics here give you a flavor of the spread of the portfolio between different regions. in terms of our sovereign operations, that is for loan and grant for borrowers' governments. You can see the Central and West Asia region, as well as South Asia regions, and Southeast Asia regions are again sort of the majority of the portfolios, and in particular, Central and West Asia is quite close to Turkey. Our largest borrowers are India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. And I'm going to give you just some quick stats on the top suppliers by different procurement type in terms of country. In 2020, by goods, the top suppliers from India, followed by China, Indonesia, and then Turkey and Uzbekistan. So I think Turkey is doing quite well this year so far. And by works for 2020, it's also India, China, and then Philippines, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Consulting services, the top 5 are India, then Australia, Korea, UK, and then Indonesia. In terms of top suppliers by amount, by goods, these are the companies and the associated number of contracts that they've won for the last 4 years, roughly 4 years. You can see the ranges between about 130 million to 550 million for each of the supplier. And in terms of works, the amount and contract numbers has increased a fair bit, and it's between 430 million to 830 millions. Our top 5 consulting firms for the last 4 years has won these ranges of contracts, and also the amounts are between 30 million to 150 millions. And I'm going to now give you an update on Turkey shares of ADB's procurement contracts and how the country's been doing in terms of winning ADB's business opportunities, following on the sort of general global update before. So since 1991, close to 600 contracts worth about 3 billion have been awarded to contractors and suppliers in Turkey, and that's for good works and non-consulting services. Whereas for consulting services, since 1991, about 41 contracts with close to 50 million been awarded to the consultant in Turkey. So if we're looking at Turkey contractor and suppliers over the last 4 years or so, the table here show you the top contractors and suppliers, and also the contract amount that's been awarded to them. You can see that the majority of these contracts went to the transport sector, with one that went to energy sector, and it's quite a wide spread of contract value as well. And if we're looking at the equivalent information for Turkey consultant, these are the consultant that's been winning consulting service contract, and the sectors a little bit more widespread between agriculture, transport, water, and urban infrastructures, coupling with a lot of individual consultants supporting various sectors. So after giving that sort of basic overview on our operations and what does the profile of company that's been successful so far look like, and these informations are available online. I'm now going to talk about accessing business opportunity in ADB's context. So focusing on how do we find them, and then undertaking advanced searches on the projects that you're interested in, or maybe the countries or sector that you're interested in, and where to find them on ADB website. So going back to the two different groups of procurement that we discussed earlier, consulting services and good and services, good and work, sorry. So for consulting services, you can find the information mainly through a system called Consultant Management System, CMS. And it's very important for consultants who are interested in ADB business opportunity to register a profile in the CMS system, because that is where the opportunity are advertised. You can find the terms of reference, the other engagement details, period, when the advertisement date is closed, what you need to submit, etc., and also associated tutorials. Whereas for good and works, the key thing to look for will be understanding the country and sector strategies, finding when the general procurement notices are, and having a look at procurement plan to get an idea of the future procurement pipeline. You can also subscribe to e-alert to get the information as well. So now I'm just going to go through where you can find the information on our website quickly, and then I'll touch on to some specific information we have prepared for COVID-19, which we have discussed a little bit so far as well in this briefing. So firstly, in the ADB website, there's a business center where you can find information for contractors, suppliers, consultant, and you can get to that through working with us, and then look under the business center sort of tab. So after you get into business center, you will find a list of how-tos or frequently asked questions, and based on the profile of your company, whether you're contractor, supplier, or consultant, there's some sort of key information on how to find business opportunity, bidding procedures, and other commonly asked questions that might be of interest. So other than the business center with the frequently asked questions, it's also important to understand where you can find project-specific information on ADB website. So if you go to the website in a link that is shown on the slide, then if you go to the projects tab, then the various projects that is filtered by the parameters on the left, which is by country, by sectors, that will show up the current active, approved, proposed projects. You might want to look at previous project as well. That would be under the status of close. So by filtering under country and sectors and looking under the project tabs, it still gives you also a profile of the project that's currently available or in the pipeline. Then if you want to look at specific tenders that is ongoing, then you can also stay on the same page and look under the tenders tab, which is circled on the slide. The key information to note there are also the associated procurement plan of the projects, and also ADB has procurement policy and regulations, which I also show you where you can find them. They're on this page as well. So other than finding projects and tender information, which are for good and works, this page shows you what might be the information you'll be looking for in consultant management system, where the consulting opportunity are listed. So after you register your profile in CMS and you want to start looking for advertised consulting opportunities, you go into this page, and on the right you can see a lot of filter. One of the latest filter that we have developed are include COVID-19 related assignments. So if your company interested in providing support on COVID-19, which I've seen in the Q&A chat box that's raised by one of our attendees, you might be interested in filtering yes for COVID-19 related assignment and see if the listed consulting services match the skill set and experience your company can provide. You might also want to filter under the consultant type, which is the second arrow on the left-hand side, between firm and individual consultant opportunities. Another key thing to note is the deadline of submission that's shown on the right-hand side arrow. And if you find the assignment of interest, then you can click into the CSRN icon, which is highlighted by the arrow on the most right-hand side, to look into further details for that specific assignment. So other than this very primary channel to find opportunities for good works and consulting services through projects and tender page, and also consultant management system, in order to plan for your future sort of bidding or proposal submission strategy for Adb business opportunities, you might want to study the project's information a little bit further, as well as country and sector information. So I'm now going to talk about where you can look for this information. So once you have identified a projects that you want to follow and are interested in bidding for or submitting a proposal for, once you go into that project page after clicking into that link, their project data sheet, which is a very good one-page information on the key information of that project, current status, what it is for, the modality, and what's the processing timeline and milestone. And then under the document tabs, it has all the key information, such as the procurement plan and project administration manual that outline the procurement packages for the projects and the implementation arrangement for the projects. Then other information you can look for under this page is also tenders that are related to these projects and the current status of those tenders. So on the right hand side, under the status, you can see this project is active. So by filtering out the status parameters, you can quickly get to projects that are active or being planned depending on what your interest of the information search is. So this is a screenshot of what the document tab looks like, and the two key documents that I've mentioned before are also pointed to here. Other than the procurement plan and the project administration manual, it also contained other key project documents such as the financial agreement itself and other important safeguard management plan document, which might be also of interest to you as part of your research as well. And this is a snapshot of what the tender page associated with a specific project will look like. Again, here under the status and deadline, you're able to sort of see where things are at. Okay, so other than studying a particular project, you might also be forming your strategy to bid or submit proposals for particular country's market. So how do we find information about a specific country? So if you go into the page of where we work and click under the countries that ADB operates in, then you can go into the strategy subtab. It will give you access then to the country partnership strategy document, which outlines our key focus for 5 years period in terms of our operations in the country. And also a very important document to look out for is the country operations business plan. Again, these two documents is available under the strategy tab, and I encourage you to have a good study of it if you identify a specific country you want to focus on, because it gives you a flavor of the sector, the projects that will be coming up over the 3 to 5 years period for this document. Other than country, if your focus or your strategy is to, then you can also find information about sector and themes-based focus area and opportunities. So under what we do tab, you can go into sectors and themes, and that will give you the relevant strategy and planning document. And other quick tips on accessing business opportunity, other than searching ADB website, is you can go into Google and type in the specific project's number, and then enter the keyword ADB, then give you quick access to that project overview and data sheet that I've shown before. So that is another way of finding the project-specific business opportunities. So other than these primary channels of accessing general operations business opportunity, ADB has developed a COVID-19 business-specific outreach page, and it contains information on COVID-19 specific business opportunities, the market research that we have been undertaken for PPE and other medical goods supply, and supply chain maps for products as well. So to get into that page, you go into the main COVID-19 response page and then look for the business outreach tab. Then after you go into that page, you might be interested in exploring access to COVID-19 opportunities on the right-hand side, where there's a button for CMS and also the tenders and procurement plans. These are quick references page with built-in filter for COVID-19 related opportunities already. And also on the page are some specific guidance for COVID-19 business opportunity as well. From time to time, we are listing specific expression of interest opportunities for good supplies as well as consulting services on this page as well. So for example, on the left-hand side, you can see that we recently sort of feature expression of interest calling for pandemic health related expertise. And we've also been running an ongoing product market research and calling for expression of interest of firm that can provide COVID-19 related good and equipment as well. That is still active. And if your firm are interested in submitting an expression of interest, you're very welcome to visit our page there. And there's also a link to the supply chain maps for pandemic fighting products that is put together by our private sector operation team there as well. Okay, so my final part of the briefing will be focusing on what is the Adb procurement system, our key procedures, and how does it fit in with being more successful in winning contract opportunities. In 2017, Adb has undergone procurement reform to improve the project performance through procurement system update. And in order to promote better procurement system, the underpinning thinking of this reform is to switch from a rule-based approach to a principles and risk-based approach to enhance efficiency and effectiveness. And that is also in line with the increase in the lending operation size of Adb, the changing need of our borrowers, and harmonizing with what other MDBs are doing, and improving the delivery system. One key part of this reform is that we've introduced quality and value for money as additional key procurement principles, and you can see that being reflected in the focus of our procurement system as well, both in terms of planning and also implementation. So rather than just look at particular cost threshold, there is now also a focus to ensure the procurement arrangement deliver quality and also achieve value for money. Some of the key changes in this reform in terms of features are the tendering method. You might come across something that's called NCB, Nationally Competitive Bidding, or ICB, Internationally Competitive Bidding before. Now it is sort of changed into OCB, which is Open Competitive Bidding, and the tendering method, contracting method, and our contract award sort of method. All of these thinking basis is now underpinned by a process that we call strategic procurement planning that we undertake in the planning stage of the projects based on complexity, risk, and also the market conditions rather than a particular set value threshold, which is what the previous system was following. And another key feature is to switch to the risk-based approach, and that's allowing to factor in the best industry practice for tendering contracting, and also allowing deeper market intelligence through that market research process in strategic procurement planning to make sure the arrangement is really fit for purpose.
Dear Chu, how many slides do you have more?
I have, I think, about 5 slides more. Is it okay? I will speed up a little bit.
You're a little bit rolling up because time is 1 o'clock already. We have some questions also. Yeah, please go ahead, but you can a little bit go faster if you can.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Key features of our, or key important part of the procurement system and procedures are also Adb's anti-corruption policy and guideline, which needs to be adhered to in our process. So going through the Adb project life cycle, where might be the contract opportunities for you? So if we're looking at the very beginning, which is the country partnership strategy, there could be opportunities for consultant as individual to undertake various governance assessment Then under the project preparation stage, there could be opportunity for both individuals or firm to support the feasibility studies and in due diligence study as well. And for procurement consultant, there's opportunity to support the strategic procurement planning process that I just mentioned. After the long-term grants approved, then there are opportunities as highlighted by the red font for consulting firms, contractors, suppliers, and service providers to work with the borrower who was a client to deliver the project through design, construction, goods supply, and project implementation support. Then after the project is completed, again, in the completion evaluation stage, there's opportunity again for consultant to work with ADB to undertake and prepare the project completion report. So these are sort of the typical windows of contract opportunity through the ADB project cycle. As mentioned at the very start, some of the procurement is undertaken by ADB and some of the procurement is undertaken by the borrower. And for the procurement that's undertaken by the borrower, the role of ADB is due diligence, and you might come across that the bidding document or request for proposal document is subject to ADB's review to make sure it is aligned with our policy and regulations. So this slide here sort of show a very typical process on the start of from the start of procurement planning, shortlisting, preparing a bidding document, bid evaluation to the contract award, and that's under the ADB prior review process. The key procurement document in this different stage will need to be reviewed and receive no objection from ADB. Now I'm going to just finish with a couple of slides on tips on what to do and what not to do. So for consultant, it's very important to register in the contract management system, create a profile, and that's your in to understand where the active opportunities are. Another advice is to develop your brand and be familiar with the relevant ADB policies and regulations. If you are looking to start getting involved in ADB business opportunity, you might want to start with small assignment first or partnering up with other firm through JV or sub-consulting arrangement to start building your own profile and reputations. It's also important to know the country of assignment and related risks in that market, and also the context of the sector if you're focusing on the sector instead. And very important to pay attention to the requirements of submissions in the procurement document and submit all the information that's required. For contractor and suppliers, it's also very important to start your intelligence gathering early. So attending business opportunity like this, we hope to provide a quick overview on where to find the information. And then when you are submitting for a bid or request for proposals, then it's important to pay attention to all of the information and requirement and submit all of that so that you don't miss out on the opportunity because one of the requirements is missing, which we've seen from time to time, and that's rather unfortunate. So pay close attention to the bid data sheet, which typically section 2 of the document for good and works, or the data sheet in consulting is generally section 4 of the document. Understand the country and sector conditions that you're working with, and if you're not clear on any of the submission related process and what you need to submit, then you should seek written clarifications in the window that is provided for that clarification as per the procurement document. So just ask. If you're in doubt, it's better to get clarity rather than be sorry later on. Some of the common issues that we find is following or using the correct bidding document template. And then we've also found that some company didn't supply all of the required supporting document. So again, just stressing that is very important to read the instruction to bidders and consultant and related data sheet very carefully, and be mindful of the information around where you submit different proposals, whether you put the technical proposals and financial proposals in the same envelope or in different envelope. Do you submit them together or separately? Those are things that you don't want to get wrong on. Understanding the applicable tax arrangement, and also allowing ample of time to prepare and submit the proposal in the system. You don't want to experience an issue with IT or internet in the last minute before the deadline. So allow a lot of time ahead of the deadline to submit your tender. And no late submissions will be accepted. So that's why you want to be planning ahead. And we've also seen sometimes that cost items missing in the proposal submit. So if cost items being requested for in the bill quantity part of the document, then make sure you complete them. In terms of what to do and what not to do, make sure we suggest other than submitting all the requested information, in particular providing the correct bid security with amount, validity, and tax as per the bidding document. Make sure that you've got signed document and power of attorney, and also JV agreement enclosed if you are a JV. The required reference projects document also included, and marking of envelopes for technical proposals and financial proposals clearly documented as per instruction. Submit on time and make sure you meet the country eligibility requirement. Some of the not to do's include don't submit conditional bids. Don't submit the technical and financial bids in the same envelope when it's asked to be submitted in separate envelopes. And for especially works contract, make sure you answer all of the requirement in section 3, which are evaluation criteria and also qualification criteria with if that is applicable. And if you are thinking about forming a JV or partnering with another firm in the form of a JV, make sure that your other partnering entity is from a country that is in the eligibility list. In terms of where you can find more information on procurement system and procedures, we have a Adb operations procurement page where you can find links to the system that I mentioned before, as well as our guideline, policy, regulations, guidance note on different procurement topic, and template to bidding document, request for proposals as well. So I will stop here. There are some specific feedback that we are very much interested in hearing from you on, which I understand the host will circulate later. And those are on just getting your insight on procurement information, how you're accessing them currently, what can be done better to make it more easier for you. And we're also looking for company who might be interested in helping us with some survey on sustainable procurement as well, in line with these themes of climate change, sustainability. If you're interested, please get in touch, and we look forward to receiving your response to the survey. Thanks very much.
Dear Chu, thank you very much. Sayın Chu'ya da teşekkür ediyorum. Böylece seminerimizi bir 10 dakika kadar gecikmeyle aslında sunumlar kısmını tamamladık. Ben bugün bize ayrılan süreyi de çok da uzatmak istemiyorum. Çünkü arka arkaya gelen tabii dijital bağlantılı toplantılarımız da var DEİK olarak. Ancak sorulan önemli sorular var ve şöyle bir toparlamak gerekirse Sayın Serhat Köksal'ın da bahsettiği gibi 1991'den bugüne kadar Türkiye 592 farklı projeye aşağı yukarı 3 milyar dolardan fazla aslında işbirliği yaptı Asya Kalkınma Bankası'yla. Ama bizim bugün burada gördüğümüz Sayın David'in sunumunda da duyduğumuz kadarıyla neredeyse 6 milyar dolarlık bir bütçe ayrılmış vaziyette. Bunun yaklaşık 1 milyar kullanılmış, 5 milyar doları da aslında boşta. Yani biz ona göre kendimizi hazırlayıp bankayla olan ilişkilerimizi Türk firmaları olarak geliştirebiliriz. Şimdi gelen sorular arasında en önemlilerinden bir tanesi tabii sunumlardı. Çünkü sunumlar çok değerli. Bu sunumları bizler sizlerle paylaşabileceğiz. Bunun mesajını vermek isterim. Bir soru Türkiye ile ilgiliydi. Nepal'den Sayın Shambu KC sormuştu. Türkiye'nin satın alma hukukuyla ilgili. Türkiye 164 tane üyesi olan Dünya Ticaret Örgütü'ne üye bir ülke. Dolayısıyla bütün hukuk kuralları aynı şekilde geçerli. Ama Sayın Kisi'ye şunu ifade etmek isterim. Eğer spesifik olarak ihale kanunu veya başka kanunlarla ilgili bize sormak istediği bir konu varsa DEİK olarak biz kendisine yardımcı olmak isteriz. Çünkü aynı zamanda bizim Türkiye-Nepal İş Konseyimiz de var. İş Konseyi Başkanımız veya Yönetim Kurulu üyelerimiz bu soruya cevap verebilirler. Şimdi gelen sorular arasında birkaç tanesi önemli ve bunlardan bir tanesini de Sayın Rüstem Abdukayumov cevaplamak istediğini biliyorum ama kendisine ben birkaç soruyu birleştirerek sormak istiyorum. Bir tanesi, bir firmamız sağlık ve sağlık yazılımlarıyla ilgili projeleri olduğunu, Türkiye'deki Sağlık Bakanlığı'yla çok da iyi çalıştığını söyledi. Dolayısıyla bu konuda Asya'da bankayla bir çalışma yapılabilir mi diye soruyor. Bu sağlıkla ilgili soruyu yöneltmek istiyorum. Bir diğeri de Kazakistan'la ilgili. Kazakistan'da büyük projeler var. Bu Kazakistan'daki projeler pandemi sürecinde durduruldu. Bunlar tekrardan açılacak mı? Bir de bunu kendisine aktarmak istiyorum. Bir de son olarak Asya Kalkınma Bankası'nın önümüzdeki 5 yıllık planları çerçevesinde kültür mirası, sismik direnç konularına ayrılmış bir bütçesi payı var mı diye bir projeksiyon soruyor bir firmamız. Dolayısıyla bu 3 tane ana soruyla Rüstem Bey'e sözü vermek istiyorum. Dear Rüstem, floor is yours for these 3 questions if you are there still.
Thank you. And I will be happy to answer to the extent I can. Provide useful information. Regarding the first question related to the health sector, I have already communicated in the chat box that I think it's better to put in touch Mr. Onur with our health colleagues because this is very specific. But I must say that since this COVID situation worsened and this pandemic was announced, Adb has approved many projects in the health sector in different countries. Some are very specific with very kind of targeted interventions. Some are not. Some are more budgetary support. But these money still can be used for different health sector related initiatives. So there is an opportunity, but of course different countries will have different agenda, different priorities. So therefore it's better if I put in touch these colleagues with our health sector specialists because they're in touch with our borrowers countries who are working on the health project. So they will be able to provide better advice. Regarding the second question on projects in Kazakhstan, of course, we have to admit that COVID has made a significant impact on many projects which are infrastructure related, not only in Kazakhstan, it's in all our developing member countries, simply for the following reasons. As you know, first of all, if it's a project under preparation, not yet approved, it requires a preparation of feasibility studies. That requires a lot of field work. And actually many Turkish consulting firms are strong and very active in preparation of the feasibility studies. So that cannot be done without field visits. So there is a delay in that sense. But also the projects which are already approved and were at the implementation stage. Sorry, I'm just charging my computer. There could be several issues related to preparation of bidding documents. Again, the bidding documents will have to be prepared based on detailed design, which also requires a lot of work in the country. But I must say that we have not canceled any of the projects. So it's true that there is a delay, but we hope that there will be some improvements. If you join our session, this launch event, which I mentioned on October 29, we are trying to bring some companies who have resumed work in the COVID-related environment. Because as you know, all countries have introduced certain protocols, certain health and safety measures related to COVID, and all consultants, contractors who will be working in the country, they will have to comply with that. We have issued certain guidances. Now these are being used, and I hope in the next 3-4 months we will see some improvements. So I just want to confirm that we are not going to cancel any of the projects and any of the tenders. It would be maybe a delay of 3 to 4 months. And the third question, Mr. Murat, could you please remind me?
Sure. For the last question is about for coming 5 years, what is your plan for the cultural heritage and seismic relevances?
Okay, so let me put it in this way. This is a very broad question, and I cannot say that ADB has a specific projects which are related to protection of cultural heritage. Right? Because the way ADB works, it's based on the agreement with the borrowing countries, which will basically identify sectors and priorities where the borrowers want ADB to support. We have not seen so far any big projects which are related to cultural heritage. But for example, when we have road construction, and when the construction, before the construction starts, before determining the alignment during the detailed design stage, there should be a consideration if that road goes through some national parks, protected areas, or cultural heritage sites. So, and we have our safeguards policies, which will require to adjust the project design so that there is no damage to cultural heritage sites. Seismic considerations, this is a different topic. That is basically present in all infrastructure projects, but this is based on local requirements. So different countries will have different requirements in terms of seismic specifications, and these will have to be included in the bidding documents. And of course, the role of construction supervision engineers is to make sure that this is being complied with during construction period. So I hope I was able to answer. If there are more questions, we can take it offline and we can respond by email. But if we have live questions now, I'm happy to take more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Rüstem. Rüstem Bey'e teşekkür ediyoruz. Ben gördüğüm kadarıyla ana soruları şu anda toparlamış ve almış bulunuyoruz. Firmalarımızın bazılarının özellikle Asya Kalkınma Bankası'yla irtibat kurmak istediğini de görüyoruz. Aynı zamanda bazı firmalarımızın, bazı iş insanlarımızın teknik soruları da var. Bunları da bizler yardımcı olacağız. Burada bütün Haziran'ın şu anda vaktini almayalım. Çünkü bize ayrılan süreyi de 25 dakika kadar geçmiş durumdayız. O yüzden herkesin saat ve zamana da uyması açısından bundan sonraki teknik soruları bizler DEİK olarak bankaya, yani Asya Kalkınma Bankası'na ileteceğiz. Aynı zamanda görüşmek isteyen firmalarımızı da arada dediğim gibi en başta köprü olmak istiyoruz demiştik. Dolayısıyla Asya Kalkınma Bankası'yla Türkiye ve Türkiye'deki firmalar arasında köprü rolümüzü olacağız. Ben bugün burada konuşma yapan Sayın Rüstem Bey, David, Frederick, Serhat Bey ve Jenny Chu Hanım'a teşekkür ediyorum. Tabii bugünkü bu organizasyonda bize destek olan bütün DEİK ekibine, Sayın Hazine ve Maliye Bakanlığımız çalışanlarına ve tabii ki Asya Kalkınma Bankası'na çok teşekkür ediyorum. Onların, çalışanların desteği olmasaydı bizler burada 6 kişi olarak bu sunumu sizlere yapamazdık. Tabii ki sizlere de tek tek teşekkür ediyorum. Çünkü katılım gösterdiniz. Yaklaşık 2,5 saat kadar bizlere bağlı kaldınız. Çok az ayrılan oldu, onu da gördüm. Dolayısıyla hepinize tek tek teşekkür ediyorum. Bir başka organizasyonda, bir başka DEİK webinarında diyelim. Tekrar görüşmek üzere. Sağlıkla kalın, kendinize iyi bakın.